The space station called Prosperity Prime floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was the largest trading hub in this part of the galaxy, home to over 2 million beings from dozens of different worlds. Ships came and went every hour, carrying goods worth more money than most planets earned in a year. The station was a place of great wealth, great power, and great secrets. In the highest levels of the station, far above the noisy markets and crowded docks, there was a private section that few people ever saw. This was where Lord Venn lived with his daughter. Lord Venn was a Corvani, a member of one of the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy. He was also the richest merchant in 3 star systems. His trading company moved goods across hundreds of worlds. His name was known everywhere. His power was absolute. But Lord Venn had a problem that all his money could not solve. His daughter, T-Rai, had been born different. The Corvani people communicated through sound in ways that other species could not understand. Their voices created complex patterns of frequencies that carried meaning, emotion, and connection. When Corvani spoke to each other, it was like music and mathematics combined. Their entire culture was built around this gift of sound. T-Rai could not hear any of it. She had been born with a rare defect in her auditory organs. The delicate structures inside her ears, which should have let her perceive the beautiful frequencies of her people, simply did not work. From the moment of her birth, she had lived in complete and total silence. Lord Venn had tried everything. He had brought the finest doctors from every corner of the galaxy to examine his daughter. He had paid for experimental treatments that cost more than some planets' entire budgets. He had begged, demanded, and threatened. Nothing worked. The doctors all said the same thing. The damage was too deep, too fundamental. T-Rai would never hear. Among the Corvani, a person who could not hear was considered hollow. It was not a word spoken with cruelty, but it was a word that carried great sadness. A hollow person could not participate in Corvani society. They could not join in the great songs that marked important occasions. They could not feel the emotional frequencies that bonded families together. They were, in a very real sense, cut off from their own people. T-Rai was 23 years old now, though she looked young by human standards. Her skin was silver gray, smooth and soft, with patterns that glowed faintly when she felt strong emotions. Her eyes were large and dark, like pools of black water that reflected the stars. She was beautiful by any species standards, but her beauty meant nothing to her. She spent her days alone in her family's private wing, surrounded by luxury but starving for connection. She had learned to read lips and written language. She could communicate through text and gestures, but these methods felt cold and distant to her. She knew that real Corvani communication happened through frequencies she would never experience. Sometimes, late at night, she would press her hands against the walls and floors, trying to feel any vibration, any hint of the world of sound that existed just beyond her reach. She never felt anything. Lord Venn loved his daughter deeply, but he did not know how to help her. He was a man who solved problems with money and power, and this was a problem that neither could fix. So he did what he thought was best. He kept her safe, hidden away from a world that would only remind her of what she was missing. He told himself it was for her protection. He told himself she was happier this way. Deep down, he knew neither of these things was completely true. Far below the luxury of the upper levels, in the working sections of the station where the air smelled of oil and sweat, a transport ship was docking. It was a small, cheap vessel, the kind that carried workers and refugees rather than wealthy traders. Among the passengers stepping off the ship was a human man holding the hand of a small girl. Du-Yun was 34 years old. His face showed the lines of a man who had known great pain. His eyes, once bright with curiosity and ambition, now carried a quiet sadness that never quite went away. He walked slowly, carefully, as if the weight of invisible burdens pressed down on his shoulders. 3 years ago, Du-Yun had been a successful acoustic engineer on Earth. He had designed sound systems for concert halls and theaters. He had understood the science of vibration and frequency better than almost anyone. He had been married to a woman named Su-min, and they had been happy. They had their daughter, Hana, and their future had seemed full of promise. Then Su-min got sick. The cancer was aggressive and fast. Within 8 months she was gone. Do-yun had tried to keep going for Hana's sake. He had tried to work to maintain their life. But everything on Earth reminded him of Su-min. Every room in their home held her memory. Every street they had walked together became a path of grief. Eventually, he could not bear it anymore. He sold everything they owned. He took Hana and bought passage on a ship heading away from Earth, away from the memories, away from the pain. He did not care where they ended up. He just needed to be somewhere new, somewhere that did not echo with the voice of his dead wife. They ended up on Prosperity Prime. Do-yun took the only job he could find, a janitor position, cleaning the upper residential sections during the night shift. It was humble work, far below his skills and education. But it came with housing and meals, and it allowed him to keep Hana close. That was all that mattered. Hana was 7 years old. She had her mother's face and her father's quiet nature. Before Su-min died, Hana had been a talkative child, always asking questions, always singing songs. After her mother's death, she stopped speaking. She was not physically unable to talk. She simply chose not to. The doctors called it selective mutism, a response to trauma. Do-yun did not push her. He understood that grief took different forms. When Hana was ready to speak again, she would. In the meantime, they communicated through gestures, through written notes, through the silent understanding that existed between a father and daughter who had lost everything except each other. Hana would sit in a corner of whatever area Do-yun was cleaning, drawing pictures in a small notebook, while her father pushed his cleaning cart through empty hallways. It was a quiet life, a simple life. Do-yun told himself that was enough. On his first night working in the restricted residential section, Do-yun noticed something strange. The hallways were wider here, more elegant. The walls were decorated with art that probably cost more than he would earn in 10 lifetimes. But there was something else. There was a sadness in this place. He could not explain how he knew this. Perhaps it was the way the lights seemed dimmer. Perhaps it was the silence that felt heavier than normal silence. Perhaps it was nothing at all, just his own grief reflecting back at him. Hana noticed it too. She looked up from her drawing and stared down the long corridor that led to the most private section of the residential area. Then she went back to her work, adding gray shadows to whatever picture she was creating. Do-yun finished his shift without incident. He collected Hana, returned to their small quarters and tried to sleep. But something kept him awake. He kept thinking about that hallway, about the feeling of sadness that seemed to hang in the air. He did not know that behind one of those doors, a silver-skinned woman was also lying awake, her hands pressed against the cold floor, searching for vibrations that never came. He did not know that their lives were about to change forever. 2 weeks passed on Prosperity Prime. Do-yun learned the rhythms of his new job. He learned which corridors needed cleaning at which times. He learned which doors were always locked and which sometimes opened. He learned to move quietly through spaces that belonged to beings far more powerful than himself. Hana came with him every night. The station's childcare services were only available during day shifts, and Do-yun could not afford private care. So his daughter became his silent companion, sitting in corners with her notebook while he worked. The station's residents never complained. Most of them never even noticed the small human girl drawing pictures in the shadows. It was on the 15th night that everything changed. Do-yun was cleaning a long corridor in the most restricted section when he heard something. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like a disturbance in the air, a feeling that something was wrong. He stopped his work and looked down the hallway. A figure was moving toward him. At first, Do-yun thought it was a ghost. The figure was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim emergency lighting. It moved strangely, bumping into walls, reaching out to touch surfaces as if unable to see properly. As it came closer, Du-yun realized it was a Corvani woman, young and clearly distressed. Her skin flickered with patterns of bioluminescence. Du-yun had read about this. Corvani displayed their emotions through light patterns on their skin. This woman's patterns were chaotic, flashing in quick bursts of blue and purple. She was scared. She was lost. Du-yun glanced back at Hana, who had looked up from her drawing. His daughter's eyes were wide with curiosity, not fear. She had never seen a Corvani up close before. The woman stumbled and nearly fell. Du-yun moved forward without thinking. His instinct was to help, regardless of species or social status. He reached out and caught her arm, steadying her before she could hit the floor. The moment his hand touched her skin, the woman froze. Du-yun felt her muscles tense beneath his grip. He expected her to pull away, to be frightened of a strange human touching her. Instead, she went completely still. Her bioluminescent pattern stopped flashing and settled into a single, soft glow of pale white. Her large, dark eyes turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression that Du-yun could not understand. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Or perhaps sound did come out, in frequencies that human ears could not detect. Du-yun did not know. All he knew was that this woman was in trouble. He tried to communicate. He pointed back down the hallway, toward where he assumed her quarters must be. He made gestures indicating help, safety, return. The woman watched his hands moving but showed no understanding. She reached up and touched her own ears, then shook her head. She could not hear. Du-yun understood immediately. He had worked with deaf humans before, back when he was an acoustic engineer. He knew that deafness was not just the absence of sound. It was the absence of a whole way of connecting with the world. He thought quickly. The Corvani were famous for their sensitivity to sound and vibration. Their entire culture was built around frequencies and harmonics. If this woman was deaf, she must be completely cut off from her own people. The loneliness of that thought struck Du-yun like a physical blow. He needed to help her get back to wherever she belonged, but he did not know how to communicate with her. Then he remembered something from his old studies. Corvani ears were different from human ears. They had external structures, delicate feather-like organs that extended outward from their ear canals. These structures were designed to catch not just airborne sound, but also vibrations transmitted through direct contact. Corvani could hear through touch in ways that humans could not. Du-yun had an idea. It was probably crazy. It might offend her. It might get him fired or worse. But he could not think of another option. Slowly, carefully, he raised his hand and pointed at her ear. She watched him with those dark, curious eyes. He pointed at his own throat, then at her ear again. He was trying to ask permission. He did not know if she understood. She tilted her head slightly, then nodded. Du-yun stepped closer. He began to hum softly, a simple tune that Su-min used to sing to Hana. At the same time, he raised his hand and gently placed his fingertips against the external ridges of the woman's ear. He did not touch the ear canal itself, just the outer structures that were designed to sense vibration. He felt the woman's entire body tense. For a moment, he thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then she gasped. It was a sound that Du-yun would never forget. It was not a Corvani harmonic frequency. It was a raw, human-like gasp of shock and wonder. The woman's knees buckled, and Du-yun had to catch her again to keep her from falling. Silver tears spilled from her eyes, running down her glowing cheeks. Her hands came up to grip Du-yun's arm, not to push him away, but to hold him there. Her bioluminescent patterns exploded into a cascade of colors that Du-yun had never seen before, patterns that seemed to express joy and disbelief and hope all at once. She was perceiving sound for the first time in her life. Du-yun kept humming, kept his fingers in contact with her ear. The vibrations of his voice, traveling through his body and into his fingertips, were bypassing whatever was broken inside her. The human vocal cords produced frequencies that were different from Corvani voices. They were rougher, more varied, full of harmonics that Corvani technology had never thought to replicate. He did not understand exactly what was happening. He only knew that something was working. Behind him, Hana had left her corner and walked over to stand beside her father. She looked up at the crying alien woman with an expression of quiet understanding. Hana knew what it was like to be cut off from communication. She knew what it felt like when words became impossible. The Corvani woman noticed the child. She looked down at Hana, then back at Du-Yun. Her expression asked a question that needed no translation. Who are you? Du-Yun slowly removed his hand from her ear. The woman's face immediately showed loss, as if something precious had been taken away. But she did not grab at him or try to force him to continue. She simply stood there, tears still wet on her silver cheeks, staring at this human janitor as if he were something impossible. Du-Yun pointed to himself and said his name out loud, even though he knew she could not hear it. Then he wrote his name on his palm with his finger, the way he sometimes communicated with Hana. The woman understood. She reached into a pocket of her elegant robe and pulled out a small device. She typed on it quickly, then showed him the screen. I am T-Rai. I am Lord Ven's daughter. I have never heard anything in my life. What did you do to me? Du-Yun took the device and typed back. I am Du-Yun. I am a janitor here. I think your ears can feel vibrations through touch, but your people's machines do not make the right kind of vibrations. Human voices are different. When I touched your ear and hummed, you could feel it. T-Rai read his words. More tears came. She typed again. Can you do it again, please? Du-Yun looked at his daughter. Hana nodded slightly, giving her approval in the silent way they had developed together. He raised his hand again. This time, T-Rai leaned toward him, tilting her head to give him better access to her ear. Du-Yun placed his fingertips against those delicate feather-like structures and began to hum a different song, an old Korean melody that his grandmother had taught him when he was a child. T-Rai closed her eyes. Her bioluminescent patterns settled into slow, gentle waves of gold and pink. She was not just hearing the sound. She was feeling it, experiencing it, letting it wash through her in ways that Corvani technology had never allowed. They stood there in the empty corridor for a long time, a human janitor and an alien billionaire's daughter, connected by nothing more than fingertips and a simple song. Hana watched them with a small smile on her face. It was the first time she had smiled since her mother died. Eventually, lights appeared at the end of the corridor. Security, guards, and servants were searching for their missing lady. T-Rai's absence had been noticed. Du-Yun quickly pulled his hand away and stepped back. He grabbed Hana and moved to the side, trying to look like a janitor who was simply doing his job. T-Rai looked at him with an expression of desperate gratitude, then turned to face the approaching group. The guards and servants surrounded her, speaking in their harmonic frequencies, asking questions she could not hear. T-Rai let them lead her away, but at the last moment she looked back over her shoulder at Du-Yun. Their eyes met. In that single glance a promise was made. This was not the end. This was the beginning. Du-Yun watched her disappear around the corner, then looked down at Hana. His daughter was holding her notebook up to show him. She had drawn a picture while he was not watching. It showed two figures, one silver and one brown, with their hands reaching toward each other. Between their hands, Hana had drawn small lines that looked like waves. Sound, Du-Yun thought. She drew sound. He took Hana's hand and walked back to his cleaning cart. His shift was not over yet. There was still work to do. But everything felt different now. The sadness that had hung over this place seemed lighter somehow. The silence felt less empty. And Du-Yun found himself looking forward to tomorrow night, wondering if he would see those dark eyes again. 3 nights passed before Du-Yun saw T-Rai again. He had begun to think that their meeting was just a single strange moment, never to be repeated. Perhaps she had been punished for wandering alone. Perhaps she had forgotten about him. Perhaps the whole thing had been some kind of dream. Then on the fourth night she appeared. Du-Yun was cleaning a sitting area near the end of the restricted corridor when he saw movement in the shadows. His heart jumped when T-Rai stepped into the soft light, her silver skin glowing gently, her dark eyes searching until they found him. She was carrying a small bag over her shoulder. She walked directly toward him, her steps quick and nervous. When she reached him, she pulled out her communication device and typed rapidly. "I had to see you again. I have not stopped thinking about what happened. Please, can you teach me?" Du-Yun read the words and felt a mix of emotions. He wanted to help her. The memory of her joyful tears still lived in his mind, but he was also afraid. He was a lowly janitor. She was the daughter of Lord Ven, the most powerful merchant in 3-star systems. If anyone discovered what they were doing, Du-Yun could lose his job, his housing, everything. He and Hana could be thrown off the station with nowhere to go. He looked at Hana, who was watching from her corner. His daughter's eyes were curious, waiting to see what her father would decide. Du-Yun typed his response. "It is dangerous. Your father would not approve. I am just a cleaner. You are an important person." T-Rai read his words. Then she typed back. "I have spent my entire life in silence. My father loves me, but he cannot fix me. No Corvani can fix me. You are the first person who has ever let me perceive anything. I do not care about danger, please." Du-Yun looked into her eyes and saw something he recognized. It was the same desperate hunger for connection that he saw in Hana's silence. It was the same loneliness that had driven him to leave Earth and everything he knew. He made his decision. Over the following weeks, their secret lessons began. Every night during Du-Yun's shift, T-Rai would slip away from her quarters and find him in whatever section he was cleaning. She learned his schedule. She learned which areas had cameras and which did not. She became skilled at moving through shadows, avoiding the servants and guards who were supposed to watch over her. Du-Yun taught her everything he could remember from his days as an acoustic engineer. He explained how sound worked, how vibrations traveled through air and solid materials, how different frequencies created different sensations. He showed her how to place her hands on speakers to feel music, how to press her palm against his chest to sense the rhythm of his heartbeat. He taught her to hear through touch. For T-Rai, each lesson was a miracle. Every new vibration she perceived was like discovering a color she had never seen. Du-Yun would hum different notes and let her feel them through her ear ridges. He would tap rhythms on surfaces and have her identify them. He would play human music from his personal device, turning the volume up high so she could feel it vibrating through the walls and floor. Sometimes he would simply talk to her, speaking words she could not understand while his fingertips rested against her ears. She said that human voices felt like warm water flowing through her, like something alive and gentle. Corvani voices, she typed, were supposed to be precise and structured. Human voices were messy and beautiful. Hana became part of their lessons too. The mute human girl and the deaf Corvani woman discovered that they understood each other in ways that words could not express. They communicated through drawings, through gestures, through facial expressions that carried more meaning than any language. Together, they created something new. It was a hybrid way of talking, mixing human sign language, Corvani gesture writing, and symbols that only the two of them understood. Hana began to smile more often. She even laughed sometimes, a silent laugh that shook her small shoulders and made her father's heart ache with love. T-Rai noticed that Hana never spoke aloud. She asked Du-Yun about it through her device. Du-Yun explained about Su-Min. He explained about the cancer, the death, the grief. He explained that Hana had stopped talking after her mother was gone. T-Rai typed back. She lost her voice because she lost someone she loved. I never had a voice because I was born incomplete, but we are both reaching for something. We are both trying to connect. Du-Yun realized that T-Rai was right. In some strange way, his daughter and this alien princess were mirror images of each other. One had chosen silence. One had silence forced upon her, but both of them were fighting against isolation. The weeks became a month. The month became 2 months. Their secret meetings continued. But secrets are hard to keep on a space station. There are cameras that can be hidden. There are servants who report to their masters. There are security systems that track every movement through every corridor. It was only a matter of time before Lord Vin found out. The confrontation came without warning. One night, Du-Yun was teaching T-Rai a new technique, showing her how to feel the vibrations of two different notes playing at the same time. Hana was sitting nearby, drawing a picture of a human ear with strange lines coming out of it. Then the doors at both ends of the corridor burst open. Guards flooded in, carrying weapons that glowed with energy. Behind them came Lord Ven himself, his silver skin flashing with angry red and orange patterns. His tall form seemed to fill the entire hallway. His dark eyes burned with fury. "Step away from my daughter," Lord Vin said. Du-Yun could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. He immediately moved away from T-Rai, putting himself between the guards and Hana. His heart was pounding. This was exactly what he had feared. Lord Ven walked forward until he was standing directly in front of Du-Yun. He was at least 2 feet taller than the human. He looked down at Du-Yun with an expression of pure disgust. "A human," Lord Ven said, though Du-Yun only heard strange musical tones. "A janitor, touching my daughter, teaching her primitive techniques. Do you have any idea what I could do to you?" T-Rai rushed forward. She tried to step between her father and Du-Yun, but guards held her back. She struggled against them, her skin flashing with desperate patterns. She could not hear what her father was saying, but she could see the violence in his posture. She pulled out her communication device and typed furiously. She held it up to her father's face. Lord Ven read the words on the screen. His patterns flickered. He read again. Then he looked at his daughter with an expression that Du-Yun could not interpret. It might have been shock. It might have been disbelief. It might have been the beginning of something else entirely. T-Rai typed more words. She showed her father again. Then again. She kept typing, kept showing, kept explaining. She typed about the silence she had lived in for 23 years. She typed about the doctors who had failed. She typed about the moment when Du-Yun's humming voice traveled through her skin and into her broken ears. She typed about what it felt like to perceive sound for the first time. Lord Ven read every word. His anger slowly transformed into something else. His patterns shifted from red and orange to purple and gray, colors that seemed to indicate confusion and pain. Finally, T-Rai typed one more message. She showed it to her father, then turned the screen so Du-Yun could see it too. "He gave me something you could not give me, father. He gave me something your money could not buy. He gave me a way into the world of sound. If you send him away, you send away the only hope I have ever had." Lord Ven stood in silence for a long time. The guards waited. T-Rai waited. Du-Yun waited with Hana pressed against his leg, both of them ready for whatever punishment was coming. When Lord Ven finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Du-Yun could not understand the Corvani words, but T-Rai read her father's lips. She turned to Du-Yun and typed a translation. "My father says he wants to see for himself. He wants you to show him what you showed me. He says if it is real, he will consider. If it is a trick, you will suffer." Du-Yun looked at the most powerful merchant in 3-star systems. He looked at the daughter who had brought him into this danger. He looked at his own child, who was watching everything with wide, trusting eyes. Then he nodded. He stepped forward. He asked permission through a gesture. When T-Rai nodded, he raised his hand and placed his fingertips against her ear ridges. And then, in front of Lord Ven and all his guards, Du-Yun began to sing. It was the same Korean lullaby that Su-Min used to sing to Hana. It was a song about stars and dreams and mothers who loved their children even after they were gone. T-Rai's eyes closed. Her patterns shifted to gold and pink. Silver tears began to stream down her face. And Lord Ven, watching his daughter experience sound for the first time in her life, began to cry as well. Lord Ven did not sleep that night. He sat in his private study, surrounded by screens displaying medical reports and scientific data. He had read every document ever written about his daughter's condition. He had memorized the opinions of every doctor who had examined her. All of them had said the same thing: there was no cure. But now he had seen something with his own eyes. He had watched his daughter perceive sound through the touch of a human janitor. He had seen her cry tears of joy, something that had not happened since she was an infant. He had seen patterns on her skin that he had never witnessed before, colors that expressed emotions she had never been able to feel. It was impossible, and yet it had happened. In the morning, Lord Ven made a decision. He summoned the finest Corvani scientists from across the galaxy. He offered them enough money to fund their research for 10 lifetimes. He told them that if they could explain what the human had done, and if they could find a way to replicate it, they would be rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. The scientists arrived within days. They brought equipment that cost more than entire space stations. They set up a laboratory in the private section of Lord Ven's residence. They were skeptical at first. A human janitor solving a medical mystery that had defeated Corvani medicine for 23 years. It seemed like a joke. Then they observed the demonstrations. Du-Yun was nervous. He stood in a room filled with alien scientists, expensive machines, and blinking monitors that tracked every possible measurement. T-Rai sat in a special chair designed to detect the slightest responses in her body. Sensors covered her ears, her throat, her chest. Every reaction would be recorded and analyzed. Hana was there too, sitting in a corner with her notebook. Lord Ven had allowed her to stay, partly because Du-Yun refused to work without her nearby, and partly because the child seemed to have a calming effect on T-Rai. "Please begin," the lead scientist said through a translation device. Du-Yun stepped forward. He looked at T-Rai, who gave him a small smile of encouragement. Then he raised his hand, placed his fingertips against her ear ridges, and began to hum. The monitors exploded with data. The scientists watched in amazement as readings that had been flat for T-Rai's entire life suddenly showed activity. Her auditory nerves, which had never responded to any stimulus, began firing in complex patterns. Her brain regions associated with sound processing, which had been dormant since birth, lit up with activity. "This is not possible," one scientist said. "And yet it is happening," another replied. They asked Du-Yun to stop. The activity faded. They asked him to start again. The activity returned. They recorded everything, analyzed everything, and slowly began to understand. Human vocal cords, they discovered, were fundamentally different from Corvani vocal organs. Corvani produced sound through precise, controlled vibrations that created pure frequencies. Humans produced sound through chaotic, messy vibrations that created countless overlapping harmonics. To Corvani ears, human speech sounded rough and primitive. Most Corvani found it unpleasant to listen to. But for T-Rai, this roughness was exactly what she needed. Her internal ear structures were damaged in a way that prevented her from processing the precise frequencies of Corvani speech. But human frequencies were different. They were spread across a wider range. They contained subharmonics and overtones that Corvani voices did not produce. When transmitted through direct touch, these vibrations could bypass the damaged parts of T-Rai's auditory system and stimulate the nerves that still worked. There was more to it than just frequency. Humans were naturally vibrating creatures in ways that Corvani were not. Human hearts beat with a strong, steady rhythm. Human lungs pushed air through their bodies in powerful cycles. Human muscles constantly trembled with tiny movements. Every human was surrounded by a field of subtle vibrations that Corvani bodies simply did not produce. The scientists called it biological noise. In most contexts, this noise was considered a disadvantage. It made human technology less precise. It made human communication less clear. It was one of the many reasons why the Corvani considered humans to be a primitive species. But for a deaf Corvani, this biological noise was a gift. The human body is like a living speaker, the lead scientist explained to Lord Venn. Every cell is vibrating. Every breath creates waves. When he touches your daughter and makes sound, his entire body becomes a transmission device. The vibrations travel through his tissues and into her ear structures in ways that our technology cannot replicate. Lord Venn was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question that mattered most. Can you build a machine that does what he does? The scientists looked at each other. This was the real challenge. They had explained the phenomenon, now they had to recreate it. The work began immediately. Du-Yun was no longer treated as a janitor. He was given quarters near the laboratory and asked to help with the research. His old knowledge of acoustic engineering became valuable again. He spent hours explaining human concepts of sound and vibration to the Corvani scientists. He demonstrated different techniques for transmitting voice through touch. Weeks turned into months. Hana continued her silent friendship with T-Rai. The two of them developed their hybrid language further, adding new symbols and gestures every day. Na drew pictures of the scientists and their machines. T-Rai showed her the beautiful gardens in the upper sections of the station, places that Hana had never been allowed to visit before. The first prototype was ready after 3 months of work. It was a small device, worn around the neck like a piece of jewelry. Inside it were components that generated vibrations similar to those produced by human vocal cords. When activated, it would transmit these vibrations through the wearer's skin and into their ears through contact points. The day of the test arrived. Everyone gathered in the laboratory. Lord Venn stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his patterns shifting with anxiety. The scientists monitored their equipment. Du-Yun and Hana watched from the side. T-Rai sat in her chair and allowed the scientists to place the device around her neck. They adjusted the contact points so they touched the external structures of her ears. They checked the settings one final time. "Ready," the lead scientist said. T-Rai looked at Du-Yun. He nodded at her. She nodded back. The device was activated. For a long moment, nothing seemed to happen. T-Rai sat still, her expression unchanged. Lord Venn's patterns began to flash with disappointment. Then T-Rai's eyes widened. She reached up and touched the device with trembling fingers. Her patterns exploded into those same colors of joy and wonder that Du-Yun had seen on the first night. She looked at her father, then at the scientists, then at Du-Yun. "I hear you," she typed on her device, tears streaming down her face. "I hear all of you. The machine is talking to me. It sounds different from Du-Yun, but I hear it. I hear it." The room erupted in celebration. Scientists embraced each other. Lord Venn rushed to his daughter and held her for the first time since she was a baby, really held her, while she cried against his chest and felt the vibrations of his own strange sobs. Du-Yun watched from the side, holding Hana's hand. He felt joy for T-Rai, genuine happiness that she was finally connecting with her world, but he also felt something else, a quiet sadness, a realization. His work here was done. The scientists had learned what they needed. The machine had been built. T-Rai no longer needed a human janitor to touch her ears and hum songs. She had technology now. Corvani technology based on human principles. He looked down at Hana. His daughter was smiling, truly smiling, watching T-Rai embrace her father. But then Hana looked up at Du-Yun and her smile faded slightly. She could sense what her father was feeling. She always could. Du-Yun squeezed her hand gently. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The prototype was just the beginning. Over the following months, the device was refined and improved. New versions were created that worked better, lasted longer, and were more comfortable to wear. News of the breakthrough spread across the galaxy. Other deaf Corvani, hundreds of them, began requesting the devices. Du-Yun found himself working as a consultant for the project. His knowledge of human acoustics was essential for fine-tuning the devices. He was paid well, far more than he had ever earned as a janitor. He and Hana moved into better quarters. They had real beds, real food, real comfort. But the best change was something that money could not buy. One evening, as Du-Yun was reviewing technical documents in his quarters, Hana walked up to him. She stood in front of him for a moment, her expression serious and determined. Then she opened her mouth. "Dad," she said. It was just one word, just a single syllable, but Du-Yun felt as if the entire universe had shifted. "Hana," he whispered, tears springing to his eyes. "I want to talk again," she said slowly, her voice rusty from 2 years of silence. "Tirai showed me that not talking is okay, but talking can be good too. She said sound is a gift. She said I should not waste my gift." Du-Yun pulled his daughter into his arms and held her tight. He cried into her hair while she hugged him back with all her small strength. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said through his tears. "I know," Hana replied. "I feel her sometimes when I dream." They stayed like that for a long time, father and daughter, no longer silent together, but speaking at last. 1 year had passed since a human janitor touched an alien princess's ears and changed the galaxy forever. The great hall of the Galactic Commerce Council was filled with representatives from 100 different species. They sat in rising rows that circled a central platform, their bodies of every possible shape and color. Some breathed air, some breathed liquid, some did not breathe at all. They had come from every corner of known space to witness something historic. Tirai stood on the central platform, looking up at the vast assembly. She wore elegant robes in silver and white, the traditional colors of Corvani nobility. Around her neck hung a device that looked like beautiful jewelry, but was actually the production model of the invention that had changed her life. Thousands of these devices had already been distributed to deaf Corvani across the galaxy. Thousands more were being manufactured every day. She was nervous. She had never spoken before such a large audience. She had never spoken at all, really, until a few months ago. But she had practiced her speech many times with Du-Yun and Hana. She was ready. Tirai activated the translation system so that all species could understand her. Then she began to speak. "For 23 years I lived in silence," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I was born into one of the wealthiest families in the galaxy. I had access to the most advanced technology that existed. I had doctors and scientists working constantly to find a cure for my condition. None of it mattered. I could not hear. I could not connect with my own people. I was, in the words of my culture, hollow." She paused, looking across the assembly. Representatives of species that had never met sat side by side, all listening. Then a human janitor touched my ears and hummed a simple song. And for the first time in my life, I heard something. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some representatives looked skeptical. Others leaned forward with curiosity. "I know what many of you are thinking," Tirai continued. "Humans are a young species. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. Their bodies are noisy and inefficient. They produce biological static that more advanced species have evolved beyond. Many in this galaxy view humans as a lesser form of life, useful for labor perhaps, but not for anything more." She smiled slightly, remembering her own prejudices before she met Du-Yun. "I am here to tell you that we were wrong." She explained the science of what had happened. She described how human vocal cords produced chaotic vibrations that created rich harmonics. She explained how human bodies were constantly generating subtle frequencies that Corvani bodies did not produce. She told them about biological noise, the very thing that made humans seem primitive, and how it had become the key to solving a medical mystery that had defeated Corvani science for generations. "The device I wear around my neck is based on human principles," Tirai said. It was designed by Corvani scientists, yes, but it could never have been created without a human showing us what was possible. It could never have been created without a man named Du Yun, who saw a lost woman in a dark corridor and decided to help her, even though helping her meant risking everything he had. She looked toward the side of the hall where Du Yun sat with Hana. They were dressed in simple but clean clothes, looking slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur around them. Du Yun was not a scientist. He was not a doctor. He was a widower who had fled his home planet with his daughter because his grief was too heavy to bear. He took a job cleaning floors because it was the only work he could find. He was, by every measure that the galaxy uses to judge importance, nobody special. T-Rai's pattern shifted to warm gold. And yet he did what nobody else could do. He gave me the gift of sound, not because he wanted money or power or fame, not because he had some grand plan. He did it because he saw someone in pain and he wanted to help. That is what humans are. That is what they do. She spoke about Hana then, the silent child who had befriended her and taught her that communication was possible even without words. She spoke about how Hana had eventually found her voice again, inspired by watching T-Rai's journey from silence to sound. She spoke about the strange family that had formed between a Corvani heiress, a human janitor, and a little girl who drew pictures in dark corners. The galaxy often asks which species is the most advanced, T-Rai said. We measure advancement in technology in military power and economic output, but I believe we have been measuring the wrong things. True advancement is the ability to connect with others. True advancement is the willingness to help someone different from yourself. True advancement is the courage to reach across the distances that separate us and say, I see you. I hear you. You are not alone. She turned to face the full assembly one final time. By these measures, humans are among the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their bodies may be noisy, their technology may be simple, but their hearts are capable of miracles. The speech ended. For a moment there was silence. Then the applause began. It started with the human representatives, a small group seated in one of the lower rows. They stood and clapped their hands together, producing that strange, loud sound that humans use to show approval. Then other species joined in, using whatever methods their cultures used to express support. The hall filled with a cacophony of approval, a symphony of appreciation from 100 different worlds. Du Yun watched from his seat, embarrassed by all the attention. Hana tugged at his sleeve and pointed toward the platform where T-Rai was smiling and waving at the crowd. She talks good now, Hana said. She talks well, Du Yun corrected gently. That too, Hana replied with a grin. After the ceremony, they gathered in a private room. Lord Ven was there, his patterns showing a mix of pride and something else that might have been humility. He approached Du Yun and stood before him for a long moment. I owe you a debt I can never repay, Lord Ven said through his translation device. You gave my daughter something that all my wealth could not provide. You gave her a life worth living. Du Yun shook his head. I just showed her something that was already there. She did the hard work herself. She learned. She grew. She became someone who can stand before the entire galaxy and speak. That was not me. That was her. Lord Ven nodded slowly. You are humble. That is a good quality. He paused. I would like to offer you a position, Director of Human Corvani Medical Integration. You would lead a team dedicated to finding other ways that human and Corvani biology can work together. The salary would be substantial. You would never need to worry about money again. Du Yun considered the offer. It was more than he had ever dreamed of. It was security for him and Hana. It was respect and status and everything he had lost when Sumin died. He looked at T-Rai, who was watching with hopeful eyes. He looked at Hana, who was already making friends with some young Corvani she had met at the ceremony. He looked at Lord Ven, the most powerful merchant in 3-star systems, who was asking a human janitor to become an important person. I will accept, Du Yun said finally, On one condition. Lord Ven tilted his head. Name it. I want to keep my mop. Lord Ven's patterns flickered with confusion. Your mop. The one I used when I was a janitor, Du-Yun explained. I want to keep it in my office, as a reminder. A reminder of what? Du-Yun smiled. That the people who change the galaxy are not always the ones in fancy clothes. Sometimes they are the ones cleaning the floors. Sometimes they are the ones that nobody sees. I never want to forget that. I never want to become someone who looks past people because they seem unimportant. Lord Ven was silent for a moment. Then his patterns shifted to deep purple, a color that T-Rai had taught Du-Yun meant respect. You may keep your mop, Lord Ven said, and I believe I may have much to learn from you, Du-Yun of Earth. They shook hands, human and Corvani, crossing the biological distances that separated their species. T-Rai approached them after her father left. She did not use her translation device. Instead, she reached up and touched Du-Yun's arm, a gesture they had developed during their secret lessons. He understood. He raised his hand and placed his fingertips against her ear ridges, just like he had done that first night in the corridor. Then he hummed the old Korean lullaby that Su-Min used to sing. T-Rai closed her eyes and smiled. She could hear through her device now, but she had told him that nothing would ever feel the same as his touch, his voice, his human warmth. The machine was wonderful, but it was still just a machine. His presence was something more. Hana ran up to join them. She threw her arms around both Du-Yun and T-Rai, pulling them into a group embrace. Family hug, she announced. Du-Yun laughed. T-Rai made a sound that was close to a laugh, something she was still learning to do. They stood together in that private room, far from the applause and the politics and the grand speeches. A human father, a Corvani woman, a little girl who had found her voice. They were an unlikely family, brought together by chance and tragedy and one simple act of kindness. They came from different worlds, different species, different cultures, but they had found something together that transcended all of those differences. They had found sound, they had found speech, they had found connection. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. Outside the windows, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of living beings. Ships came and went from Prosperity Prime, carrying goods and passengers and stories that would never be told. But on this day in this place, one story had reached its ending, or perhaps its beginning. A deaf woman had learned to hear, a silent child had learned to speak, a grieving father had learned to hope again. And the galaxy had learned that sometimes the most primitive species had the most advanced hearts. The end.